So Wireless Festival is officially cancelled. The UK government has banned Kanye West from being able to enter the UK. And Wireless was saying, you know what, if you are going to block Kanye West from entering the UK, our headliner for this show, then we're just going to cancel the show altogether. So with this in mind, I wanted to record this video to share sort of my thoughts on everything that's happened, but more so from a corporate communications standpoint. I want to look at the organizers, I want to look at the particular sponsors that have dropped out, and I'm just going to kind of cover it from that particular lens to look at the whole idea of when authority becomes a liability and how that affects corporate partnerships and corporate relationships on a wider scale, right? So if you are interested in this video, then please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And if you see my arm as well, don't mind me. I'm completely fine. I gave blood a couple hours ago. And if you are someone who doesn't give blood, then I think you should really start. I'm going to do a video at one stage talking about the importance of giving blood. But in the meantime, take my word for it and make sure that you give blood as and when you can, right? But on that note, let me just get started. I'm going to go on the BBC, and then we're just going to do a quick sort of summary before I share sort of my thoughts with the notes that I put together. So, Wireless Festival cancelled, as I mentioned, after government stops Kanye West entering the UK. So, if we go through a bit of the summary, so it says the organizers say the Home Office has withdrawn Ye's ETA, i.e., the permission to enter, denying him entry into the United Kingdom. As a result, Wireless Festival is cancelled and refunds will be issued to all ticket holders. So the Home Office made its decision on the grounds that his presence would not be conducive to the public good. The Prime Minister says a US rapper should never have been invited. In recent years, West has caused outrage with anti Semitic, racist, and pro Nazi comments, and festival sponsors had begun withdrawing support, right? So this morning, West offered to meet the Jewish community in the UK, saying, my only goal is to come to London and present a show of change, bringing unity, peace, and love through my music. So Wireless Festival was due to take place in London, with West headlining all three nights, right? So what I want to do in particular, 'cause I did come across this live report as well that I want to share. So Wireless Festival cancels all 3 days after Kanye West blocked from entering the UK. So with this, the Prime Minister has insisted he should never have been invited in the first place after causing outrage over a string of anti-Semitic comments. The rapper, one of the biggest figures in hip-hop history, took out a full-page advertisement in the Wall Street Journal in January this year, apologizing for his anti-Semitic comments and said his bipolar disorder meant he had lost touch with reality. But several major sponsors withdrew their support for the festival after West was announced as the headliner for all 3 days. The decision to block him has been broadly welcomed by politicians and Jewish groups. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says it hopes the lessons can be learned across the industry, while one charity has called banning West the sensible outcome to a bruising episode for British Jews. Some fans have also agreed with the decision, but some who were planning to see him at Wireless have voiced their disappointment. All right, cool. So that's that in a nutshell, right? So let me share my notes and I can kind of go through what I've been pondering on for the last sort of couple of days. So when authority becomes a liability, so let's just go through this, right? So for me, Kanye West wasn't banned from the UK because he lost influence. He was banned because the risk outweighed the value for different stakeholders. And for the sake of this particular video, I want you to bear in mind those two particular words, value and risk. Okay. Bear those two in mind. So with risk, we have the idea of your reputation, unpredictability, exposure. And for the idea of value, you are then thinking about influence, reach, and demand. So please do bear this in mind as I continue to go through these slides, right? So first and foremost, headliners are agreed in advance. Sponsors are informed early and risk is assessed before launch. So we need to bear this in mind when it comes down to all the things that has happened in recent weeks, right? Because with the idea of Kanye West headlining for Wireless, this would have been something that would have been put forward a long time ago. And not only that, it would have been a case of due diligence, and it would have been a case of risk assessment in terms of seeing if everyone, as far as the sponsors are concerned, are happy with having Kanye West headlining Wireless Festival. So then it begs the question, why exactly did sponsors drop out following the fact that they always knew that Kanye West was performing? And that's where it gets a bit tricky from a corporate communication standpoint, because ultimately, if you always knew this was going to happen, you deciding to withdraw doesn't make a difference on the basis that you was always aware, right? It effectively means that you were always co-signing of the said situation until there was more public backlash, right? So with that, Diageo and Pepsi drops wireless sponsorship and criticism of Kanye West booking, right? So this was the first one that I saw. And for myself, I was thinking, oh, this is quite big. This is a massive deal with these sponsors dropping out. But then I went and did a bit more digging and some more research, right? And then I then realized that Live Nation actually owns wireless, right? And for those who are not familiar with Live Nation, they are responsible for practically every big major music event or live event in the world, right? They're the biggest live entertainment platform in the world. So that's when I realized that this is a bigger sort of corporate situation at large. It's not a case where wireless is just simply one small entity being bashed around and bullied into canceling, right? It was a lot more complicated than that, a lot more complex, right? Because when you then realize that Live Nation actually owns wireless, and Live Nation being the biggest live entertainment platform or company in the world, it then begs to differ what was the main objective as to all of the others now deciding to pull out when they knew already what was going on. And for you guys that may or may not be listening to Kanye West or his music or whatever the case, he did recently perform at a stadium show, right? And if you guess correctly, this show was also developed by Live Nation, right? So, in the grand scheme of things, it is Live Nation's best interest to have Kanye West perform. He's currently on tour doing shows in different countries and whatnot. So, you have to bear that in mind. Live Nation own Wireless Festival. So, with Live Nation orchestrating all these current live shows that's happening all over the world at this particular moment in time, they are not going to have Kanye West drop out considering all the stuff that they're doing already. And we just have to imagine if they are able to do this at this scale all over the world, that is a lot of money generated, millions of pounds or dollars, in fact, generated off of the back of Kanye West being able to perform. So then now the question is, with this now happening and the government banning Kanye West from entering the UK, what does this look like for the relationship between, say, Live Nation as a corporate entity and the UK as far as live music and live entertainment is concerned? And let me know in the comments your thoughts as well. But I think with that, that's where it gets a bit tricky in that regard. And then even more so, the idea of the sponsors dropping out. Like I mentioned, when I first thought of wireless being its own single entity, it seemed like it would be quite damaging for wireless with so many sponsors dropping out. But in actual fact, I think it's quite the opposite, because with these big sponsors dropping out, considering Live Nation owns wireless, then that implies that there's going to be so many additional sponsors that will be ready to effectively take their place, right? As soon as they're gone, they're going to replace them with a new set of sponsors who have been waiting for an opportunity to be presented alongside all the other sponsors for Wireless Festival. So it's going to be very interesting in the next sort of months and even up to the next year when they do wireless again, if they even do wireless again, to see what that sponsorship dynamic looks like and how sort of Pepsi and Diageo are going to maneuver through this from a sponsorship perspective. Personally, I think that's quite interesting. But from this, hold on. For me, the value outweighed the risk, right? The value outweighed the risk for Live Nation because it had the cultural relevance involved, the audience demand was definitely involved, and the commercial upside was evident. So, with those three things in mind, then you have to bear in mind, of course, Live Nation is going to be pushing for this. They're pushing for this because they've done it already. They've done it in various other countries with Kanye performing. So it only makes sense to have wireless as an additional headliner because the amount of revenue that will be generated from this is going to be astronomical. But then, as mentioned, with Keir Starmer blocking the artist formerly known as Kanye West from entering Britain for the 3 day wireless festival in July, then we automatically then realize that the visibility of the risk has increased, right? The media coverage expanded. There's so much pieces of media coverage that has been present based on this particular story. Public scrutiny has intensified. There's so much public scrutiny at the moment, so much to the point where sponsors felt that they had to make their decisions to in the interest of their stakeholders and the public in that regard, and also attention scaled rapidly. And then from that, I want you to realize as well that the risk was repriced. And the reason why I say that is because ultimately there hasn't been anything that has significantly changed, right? From what Kanye West did to now. All the things are still relevant and they're still sort of in the air with sort of the aspect of how people feel about it, right? But then it's the same information, but now it's different weighting. The public exposure has now changed the equation of that particular thing. And from a sort of branding standpoint, that is something that you would need to bear in mind is that it doesn't necessarily matter what it is that you've done in the past, right? However, it's about what is it that you have done that is able to come back and be repriced in a way that is the same information but deemed different based on the perception and the view of everything. Despite all the particular things you would have done or tried to do in order to save face or to effectively build your reputation back, you have to bear in mind that there's always going to be particular things, if you're not careful, that's always going to be over your head, per se, right? So, with that, corporate comms is a risk function. If you start to think of it like that, then you start to realize that all this stuff is interesting because ultimately they decided to drop out of the sponsors to play it safe. They felt the risk was too much and the risk was more than the value that they were thinking about in this instance, right? So with that, you then have to think why the sponsors revisited the idea and they decided not to go for it. So it could have been from a brand safety concern and that increasing. It could be the internal escalation occurred within internal teams with the situation at hand, or the global exposure risk expanded, right? And funny enough, before any sort of platforms raised awareness of these sponsorships, there wasn't anything actually before then. There wasn't anything to kind of highlight the sponsors who were involved in sort of collaboration and partnership. And with that, it's the reason I add this particular section in, because even though it wasn't sort of mentioned or put in the spotlight to begin with, you have to remember that partnerships, it transfers reputation, right? brands don't just buy exposure, they inherit association, and through that, they share risk. So when it came down to Pepsi, for example, now deciding to drop out based on the public backlash that they received. And remember the idea of the risk, the perception of that risk has now changed. The weighting of that risk has now changed off the back of the public scrutiny. So through that, now Pepsi has now felt that they needed to now make a change or make a step into what they're doing on the basis that they now felt that they inherit the association based on the association of Kanye West. So it just doesn't look good on their part. And it looks particularly dangerous when they're thinking about it because for that, they want to ensure that there are no opportunity for them to get the backlash that would then lead to a loss in revenue. So they will do whatever it takes to ensure that that's not the case for them, right? And then the ecosystem protects itself. The partnerships prioritize stability. No individual outweighs the system, right? When it comes down to these corporate partnerships and these corporate organizations, it doesn't matter how big you are in reference to that, they will definitely put their foot down if they feel that revenue and reputation is hugely at risk as a result, right? And then, yeah, with it, it's a global decision. It's a global decision. As mentioned, wireless sits within Live Nation. Multi market relationships matter, especially in this time, and decisions go beyond one event. It goes beyond one event. And that's why I was pondering, thinking, what is going to happen with the relationship between the UK and wireless, but then more importantly, the UK and Live Nation, because Live Nation, as I mentioned, own wireless. So it'll be interesting in the next few sort of weeks and months to kind of see how that relationship goes beyond this particular situation. And then this part I think is particularly interesting, the idea that risk tolerance is market specific. Different regions respond differently, and UK context influences decisions, right? And that's the whole reason why we are in a position right now where there's a sort of backlash at this moment where a lot of people are saying that the government is hypocritical on the sense that they won't let Kanye West in the country, but there's been many other examples of people who are deemed as a threat or more so as a threat as Kanye, but they're still allowed to be in the country as well. So then it does add to that level of hypocrisy to the situation as well. And then from a sort of communication standpoint, I suppose it's the sort of idea that is one for one and something else for another person that is making sort of the public sort of disagree with the idea of what's going on at this particular moment in time as well. And I suppose for them, it's a short term loss versus long term protection for the sort of sponsors that decided to drop out. Immediate revenue may drop, but brand relationships are preserved off the back of any particular future opportunities they can have as well. And future opportunities are protected as a result. So, with that, those are the main sort of things that companies are really thinking about when it comes down to these things. Are we able to preserve the relationships that make the most sense for us? And are we in a safe position where we can ensure that we are able to create future partnerships that make the most sense for us later down the line, with it being a thing that basically rears its ugly head again to say that you have been associated with said person or said thing. So for that reason, we cannot go through forward with this partnership. And then future decisions will shift. So with that, I'm thinking there may be more conservative bookings as a result, maybe down the line. There will be stronger sponsor influence. So now there'll be sponsors who are more than willing to take the baton of Pepsi or Diageo and effectively just kind of stand their ground when it comes down to any potential public scrutiny. Because I don't imagine Pepsi or Diageo, as mentioned, being in a position where they're able to get back their sort of main headline sponsors as they did previously. I don't believe so. If you think so, let me know in the comments. But I personally think that it's a sort of relationship that is going or has broken down and will not be something that we will potentially see from a perspective of wireless again, I would say. And ultimately, the decision didn't change because of new information, right? It changed because of increased exposure. And your brand is reassessed continuously, and perception evolves in real time, and risk is constantly reevaluated. And that's what I want to leave you with, to be fair. The idea that perception evolves in real time. So no matter what you are doing, you need to ensure that you are able to identify how you are perceived on a regular basis as well. Because as mentioned, with sort of the whole situation of Kanye West, for example, and everything that's happened during that time, despite these sort of attempts of apologies and looking to do better and be better, you have to bear in mind that as far as a crisis is concerned or a situation, there's some things that people will say that they will never forget, right? No matter how far you've come in the process of moving on from said situation, because risk is constantly being reevaluated no matter what. So with that, that's it for this video. I think it was more so just to kind of share my thoughts and opinions on the situation in a way that aligns the most with the work that I do. And I thought looking at it from a corporate standpoint, I thought was an interesting take as well. But let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, then please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And looking forward to just dropping more. If you want to see more sort of videos like this, where I kind of just put a few notes and slides together and then just kind of go through it in real time, let me know, as I would love to do that as well. And if you would like me to do some more sort of topical trending news bits as well, do let me know, because I've been doing a lot of sort of evergreen content at this moment in time, just sharing my insights of all things branding, marketing, and PR. But for anything that is sort of happening on a day to day that you want me to cover and look at it from the lens of a PR, marketing, or branding, then just let me know in the comments and I'll do what I can to help. But in the meantime, between time, look after yourself. Peace out, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Look after.